Our next presenter is Ellie.
Hi, there's a break on the schedule. Are we doing that, or are we moving right through?
No, we're not doing the break because we're running out of time. Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. Can you guys see the presentation?
Yeah.
All right. So, hi everyone, my name is Ellie Grushcow, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the work that I'm doing with my colleague and supervisor, Professor Sheridan, looking into how teamwork skills, ethics and equity, and impact on society are explicitly taught together in undergraduate engineering education. And the way that we've approached this question is through a review of the literature following systematic principles. So, first of all, why have we chosen these three things? Sorry about that, slight slide issue. There we go. So these are teamwork, ethics and equity, and impact on society are actually three of the Canadian Engineering Accreditation Board's graduate attributes. And if you're not familiar, the graduate attributes are collections of skills that the graduates of CEAB accredited programs should have by the time they graduate. And the reason that we focused in on these three attributes is because we believe that together they are crucial for an engineering leader to have. And that's why we're interested in doing this research, is because when we figure out how we can teach these attributes in combination to our students, we can figure out how to teach the kind of engineering leadership that iLead is interested in fostering. So more specifically, the goals of this research are to consolidate the ideas and expertise that other people in our field have with how to teach these things, and also to consolidate all of that information, to put it in context so that it can not only inform our future practice, but so that it can also inform the practice of others who are interested in teaching these things to their students. So what we've done to do this research is we've converted our research question into search terms that we can put into academic databases. And we've chosen 6 databases with the help of our research librarian at iLead, Mindy Thuna. And as you can see, we've chosen databases across some different fields because engineering education questions like this one are interdisciplinary questions. And so we've had to look into the resources of multiple different disciplines to see who is doing this kind of work. Once we've done those database searches, the way that we choose the final documents that we're going to look at is using our inclusion and exclusion criteria. What you see here is just the inclusion criteria. The exclusion criteria are sort of the inverses of these. And the most important of these criteria to me are, first of all, that the intervention described in a document that we select has to include at least 2 of the attributes that we're looking into. So either looking at all 3 of the attributes being taught together, as you see with the black arrow, or looking at some combination of 2 of those attributes being taught together, as you see with those blue arrows. And then the other inclusion criterion that I think is very important is that the intervention has to include explicit instruction of each of the concepts that it is talking about. So we define explicit instruction in our research as when a framework of the concept being taught is introduced in addition to students' practical experience. So taking teamwork as an example, just working in a team by itself would not count as students having been explicitly instructed in teamwork. But if students are also having some kind of a discussion in class, perhaps, about what good teamwork can look like in addition to their practical experience, that would be an example of explicit instruction as we have defined it. So in terms of the actual data that we would like to collect from these documents, we're interested, of course, in some basic information. When was the document made? Where was it made? When was the intervention conducted? We're also interested in the context of the intervention. So who were the instructors? What was their academic background? Were other things being taught in addition to the attributes? Was the intervention mandatory for the people who were involved? And then we're also interested in some deeper and more detailed questions. So what specific pedagogy and assessments are people using when they teach these attributes? And then also, what are the motivations for teaching these attributes and these other subjects with them in the way that people are choosing to teach them? In our current round of data collection, we targeted specifically documents describing an intervention with all 3 of the attributes. And just because we targeted those things does not necessarily mean that that is entirely what we got. So about 6% of the papers that we return, that's 27 papers from this database search, fit our inclusion and exclusion criteria, and that includes papers that only discussed an intervention with 2 of the graduate attributes. So currently, the formal data collection process for these documents is ongoing, answering all of those questions in a comprehensive way that we saw on the data collection slide. But what I would love to do right now is share with you a couple of the interventions that we have come across. We can compare and contrast them, and I think that they demonstrate a concrete example of some really interesting answers that you can get to some of those data collection questions that we are asking. So the first intervention I'd like to introduce to you is teaching ethics as design. And what's particularly interesting about this intervention is the way that some of the attributes that we're interested in are combined with another engineering skill. So this intervention is a course that focuses on teaching ethics and on teaching engineering design. And the way that those two things are taught together is the central idea that the instructors stick to and convey to their students is this idea that ethical decision-making and design decision-making are similar processes that require similar skill sets to address. So for example, they have similar levels and kinds of complexity, and they have similar kinds of impact. And the way that you can assess whether you have made a good ethical decision or a good design decision, according to the authors, is by thinking about the impact that that decision will have on society. So in ethics, what impact will that decision have on the people that you're responsible for, the people around you? In design, what will the impact be on your stakeholders? What will the impact be on wider society? And so here you can see a really interesting answer to a question that gets asked when you think about how are people integrating these attributes with other engineering skills. The second intervention that I want to introduce to you is I Survived the Crisis. And what's interesting about this intervention is the way that connections are made between the attributes. So what this intervention is it was a workshop that focused on crisis role-playing simulations with subsequent debriefings. And the 2 goals that the instructors had for this course was, first of all, to teach their students how team dynamics and roles can shift in a crisis situation, and then also to teach their students, to give their students experience with how to make ethical decisions and consider the impacts of their decisions in a stressful environment. And so from these 2 goals, you can see that ethics and equity and impact on society are being grouped together very tightly. They're considered almost as the same concept, actually in a similar way to what we saw with the previous intervention, where ethics and equity and impact on society are tied together so closely. And then teamwork is a separate skill that's still being taught in combination through the fact that so much engineering work happens in teams, and so that includes engineering work where ethical considerations and societal considerations are particularly important. One of the other interesting things that we have found so far is the differences in numbers of returns that you get when you look for different attributes being taught in these databases. So you can see from this graphic here that the number of returns you get when you just look for ethics and equity is much smaller than what you get when you look for people who are teaching impact on society or who are teaching teamwork. And that lack of returns carries through, of course, into combinations. When you see a combination of a skill with ethics and equity, you get a much smaller number of interventions than when you look at the teamwork and impact on society combination, where there's a very large number of documents and a corresponding larger number of interventions that will be helpful to look at. And so it has been interesting to see particularly that ethics and equity is being examined potentially less than the other 2 attributes here that we are interested in. And that actually brings me to next steps, some things that we are interested in investigating. So it might be interesting to investigate that question about ethics and equity. We also, of course, are going to finish investigating the information that we have from this round of document collection and put that in context so that it is helpful to practitioners, so that it's helpful to us for future practice. We would love to complete similar searches to this one, targeting pairs of attributes rather than targeting the full group of 3 as we did for this round. And we would also love to investigate why certain pairs of attributes might be chosen, how people are choosing to combine attributes with each other and with other engineering instruction, particularly looking maybe at incentives and disincentives for teaching things, teaching these attributes at all in certain ways. And we would love to do that research through potentially surveys and interviews with instructors and with other stakeholders. Thank you so much for listening today. I would also like to thank the Dean's Engineering Emerging Innovation in Teaching professorships for the funding to be able to do this very interesting research. And if anybody has any questions, I am happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ellie. So we have a question from Wei Tiong. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just got my mic muted. Yes, it's very interesting. So why do you limit this study to literature review? Have you tried to see if a actual scenario kind of agree with these literature data?
So the literature review is focusing on descriptions of interventions that people have actually carried out. So what it allows us to do is, without having to go and specifically in person observe classes that people are teaching or specifically talk to people about classes that we have taught, we can look at their description of what they've done. So it is a way to look more broadly at actual applications that people have actually done.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Next question is from Ravi Raj. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I thought it was very interesting, but I think I had a question similar to Professor Ng's question on, did you look at other, like universities' curricula to see how this was taught in actual, not just from reporting in papers, but also, where it shows up in curricula? Is it first year, second year, third year, fourth year, that kind of breakdowns?
Yes, that is information that's present in the practice papers. Generally, it's practice papers that we have found, and that is actually something, I believe that it's on the data collection slide, that we are interested in finding out.
Thank you.
Hello.
Did you do any year-by-year breakdowns, like for which year of
Yes.
the study?
Yes, that is. We haven't taken that information from each intervention that we've looked at, but that is, as we continue our data collection process, we will be collecting that data.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Ellie? Okay, thank you very much, Ellie.